The global balance of power is shifting. As the BRICS bloc expands and seeks to redefine global governance, the traditional Western-led order faces uncertainty, fragmentation, and hesitation. Caught between these two poles, the Global South has become both a geopolitical battleground and the potential driver of a new multipolar world. Countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America are increasingly asserting their voices, exploring new trade alliances, investment routes, and technological partnerships. Yet, they also face the challenge of maintaining independence while engaging with competing powers that offer distinct models of development, finance, and influence. In 1992, BRICS held only 16.7% of global GDP, compared to the G7's 45.5%, illustrating the dramatic shift in economic gravity over 3 decades. As of 2024, BRICS now accounts for 40.2% of global GDP, with projections rising to 40.7% in 2025, according to IMF data. BRICS has officially expanded to 10 members in 2024-2025, including Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Indonesia, and the UAE, alongside the original 5 countries. This session brings together global policymakers, economists, and strategists to explore how the Global South can navigate this evolving landscape, balance opportunity with autonomy, and shape what kind of global order may emerge in the years ahead.
I'm just going to get started. Okay, everyone, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dina Sherif. I'm actually Egyptian. I want to thank Dr. Abla for giving me an excuse to come home from MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I run an entrepreneurship center at MIT called the MIT Co-Sharper Center that's very focused on how innovation and entrepreneurship is a core pathway to achieving prosperity. And I'm super excited to be leading a conversation with this amazing group of panelists to really have a conversation on the current implications of BRICS and what is happening in the West on what is called the Global South. I'm going to already go into a dissent. I don't like the word Global South. I'm not sure what it means. I'm not sure what it's south of. So we're going to talk about global growth markets because most of these countries are some of the fastest growing companies in the world, countries in the world right now. I want to start out with a question to all of you. And Mariya, I'm going to start with you, and we'll go down this way. So the core question that I want to start with is, we're now facing the evolution of these regional blocs, such as BRICS. BRICS is really more of a representation of growth markets. And we're starting to see this kind of tension between the West and blocs like BRICS. And my question is, how is the expansion of BRICS really impacting the economic and political landscape of these growth markets? And how will it start shifting the relationship with Western countries? So for example, when we think about Africa, how is BRICS going to really shift the dynamic between countries in Africa or countries in Asia with the West? So I'll start with you. And we're going to be concise and precise, everyone.
Well, I will try. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm particularly honored to be part of this panel and of this wonderful event. Thank you very much, Dr. Abla. Well, I think that today, the so-called Global South, it's a geopolitical fact. And as such, it's a very dynamic arena, but for me, it's an arena of choice. That's what, for me, is the first consequence. European Union and all the others bloc need to prepare an offer, to make a proposal to be chosen. And that's why I think that that's a very, very big challenge for the European Union, because we are fully aware that we need to reimagine this proposal. We need to be flexible, we need to be pragmatic, but I would also like to add here, we need to co-create agendas. If we manage to co-create agendas with the so-called Global South, we have much more chances to position ourselves as defining actor in this geopolitical arena.
I'm going to come back to you. I have a follow-up, but hold that thought. We'll keep going. Sunjoy, you were very excited to answer this question outside.
Thanks, Dina. Before I start answering the question, let me just take you up on something you mentioned. What is the Global South? You don't believe in the Global South.
I don't know what it means.
I'll tell you what the Global South is. The Global South is not a bloc. The Global South is a sentiment. It's a sentiment born out of a model of predatory economics, which they all experienced during years of colonialism, and then emerging from it into the aftermath of the Second World War, the Global South gave birth to the non-aligned movement. Okay? Now, this place, Cairo, in many ways was the epicenter of that movement with President Nasser. 1961 was the first conference on the non-aligned movement. And what was a non-aligned movement all about at that point of time? The non-aligned movement was about the simple concern that the rules-based global order could be and was being weaponized to create spheres of influence. That was the fear. And that is where the momentum of the non-aligned movement really built up through all these years. It was much derided by the so-called global north.
I agree with you. Yeah. The non-aligned movement is fantastic. I just think that the visualization of the global south versus the global north creates a mindset of less than. Because it creates a visual of there is a part of the world that is under the north and needs to be directed by the north. And I challenge that, but I give it to you.
The magnetic poles are shifting and the north becomes the south, and that is what is happening. Okay? And these flips have happened through the ages and the millennia, and they will be happening again. So what is on top and what is on bottom, we do not know. Today, when we start talking about BRICS, now BRICS today carries the momentum of large, huge economies on the move. The fastest growing economies are part of BRICS. Demographics is with BRICS. And global power is shifting. But more important than the shift in global power, something else is happening. See, we are back to the world of predatory economics. Certain countries are closing their borders, are closing their economies, while insisting that others open theirs. It's a complete perversion. No, back to a different kind of economics, which was at play centuries ago, or just 1.5 centuries ago. So in this situation, BRICS, the deeper shift which is happening is that there is a shift in discourse. And the centers, the global centers of discourse are again shifting. You have conferences like this in Cairo again, ECES. The great work that ECES is doing here. Please participate in the debates taking place in Africa. Please participate in the conferences happening across all parts of the global south. There's a big difference between the ideas being discussed there, the voice being given to Gen Z in these places, which you see right here in the ECES, is different from what you see happening in Western Europe. It's very difficult to have a sane debate many times. You have to tread on eggshells to have a conversation. There are parts which will not be discussed, the issues which will not be discussed. Similar is the state in Washington, D.C. You cannot have these conversations.
Yeah.
So that is the big difference. If BRICS is making a difference, if the plurilateral bodies are making a difference, if capitals like Cairo are making a difference, it is because they are becoming the leaders of discourse, and that is where the shift is going to occur. That is the shift which we are seeing.
So from your perspective, you're seeing BRICS shift the global discourse in a very different way that's giving voice to people who were not on the arena. I love it. Thank you. Tomas.
Dina, thank you very much. Before responding to your question, let me express my sincere thanks to Omar and Abla for this fantastic forum. I must confess, I am not very comfortable, in separating the world into three parts. This idea of global south, of BRICS, BRICS plus, and so-called Disoriented West, if I read the title of this session. Maybe a way to try to define Global South is to observe very carefully the degree of demographic transition everywhere in the world. Because we face a very particular situation in which the two regions which has a trade surplus, China and Europe, are aging population, and very quickly, quicker than expected. On the other side, you have many countries which can use their demographic dividend, namely India, for instance, or Egypt. So I think that maybe if we try to think in terms of emerging markets, this importance to demography should be first. Second, Schuman made a reminder about the non-alignment movement, which is an important historical reminder. Let me make another one. It's interesting to remind that BRICS is initially an acronym coined by Goldman Sachs at the beginning of 2001, by Jim O'Neill to be more precise, for an investment strategy. And what is interesting is to see how something which was coined for investment strategy has been transformed into a political format. Now, if you observe BRICS and all the story of the BRIC formats, the fact that South Africa joined in 2011, the fact that there is now 5 more countries, 2 of them hesitated, important to remind, Argentina and Saudi Arabia. We have this impression sometimes that when we speak about Global South, is it partly or completely linked to BRICS Plus? I'm not so sure. And last point, I'm not comfortable, with this idea of a disoriented West for one obvious reason, which was discussed this morning. It is the gap right now between Europe and the US. Not really in economic terms, even if there is a trade war decided by the Trump administration, but more and more in ideological terms, in a different perspective and different reading of the world.
Thank you. I'm going to come back and follow up with you again, Tomas, on something that you said. But Mamadou, from your perspective, in relation to how is BRICS shaping more of a different economic and political landscape in relation to Africa, for example?
Thank you, Dina, and greetings to everyone. I believe that as the
to hold the mic closer.
I believe that as the global order shifts, perhaps the question we should ask is not only how to engage with BRICS or other emerging forces, but to see how do we build strength within ourselves to be a player in that space, or how do we build on the progress that have been made. You just said that visualization of a north and a south, or global south beneath as a visual, but I think also it was based on economic, sadly, on economic realities, where we have a strong north and a developing south. But today, the facts actually are showing a different situation. If you look today, the global south have rose 5.4 times since 2000. And today it represents 40% of global GDP, 46% of world exports, and it represents 57% of global FDI flows. This changes, to me, the dynamics.
Yes.
Yeah, and this means that, and if you look further, even the expansion of the BRICS with Egypt, UAE joining, and Ethiopia as well, I think this is also deepening really the global south. And I think that we need really to build on those economic performances and the role that the Global South is playing now in the global economy to really position. But to do that, there are prerequisites that needs to be addressed, and which I think that I will
We're going to
talk
come
about
back
later.
to those prerequisites.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to you, John. Go ahead.
Thanks very much for the ECES for inviting me. I have been living in Egypt for several years. There is a saying in Egypt, whoever drinks the Nile water will come back again. I'm very happy to come back to my second home. So for a question, I think I want to put an argument that the BRICS and the West is not a binary choice, but it is a needed time because the emerging markets, the developing countries want diversification of their choices, in terms of economic and political, and also cultural to some extent. So I think the West is very easy to define, right? If you landed in the airport in Rome, you can easily see which country is the Western country, right? The EU countries, UK, United States, Canada, Japan, South Korea, or maybe plus Singapore, could get the visa-free into the Roma airport, and others are in the other grouping of the airport. So I would say the BRICS countries are not as anti-West. They are just a group of the non-Western countries. But why? Because I think people are witnessing this time as a fragmentation. They are a little bit uncertain and scary what will happen next. In this transitional time, I think many countries in the developing world want to have something kind of like an alternative, which is not as consolidated as the previous existing international system, but still, it provides a platform for those countries to discuss things and have made some consensus. So basically, my argument is that BRICS is not a camp, like the socialist camp in the Cold War. It doesn't have a collective defense structure. It doesn't have ideological glue. It doesn't have a unified narrative of the future. But it's just a group that the countries want the diversification of the choices.
You don't think that's ideological?
No. Maybe some country inside wants, but collectively, I don't think there's a consensus.
It'd be interesting to hear what others think about that, but keep the mic. Jojo, I want to ask you a question, another question. Not of the questions I had posed, but a lot of your research has covered the relations between China and the Arab region, and obviously I have a bigger obsession with China in relation to Africa at large. But there is this fear that China is coming in as another force to extract from what we call the Global South, and to use these countries to support its own. So is that a reality or a myth?
No, I think first we need to be clarified is that every country is standing for its own national interest. So it's not a force for China to standing for its own economic interest and for any other countries. So at the previously existing system, of course, China benefit a lot, but also there are other countries benefit from it. So I think the fact and reality you mentioned, it's already happened in the previously existing system, but we don't know what will happen in the future. Because this phenomenon of fragmentation is also feel very concerned and uncertain in China as well. It is not that China have a very grand strategic plan to dominate everything. China is also trying to navigate the uncertainty that right now the uncertainty have been created in domestic United States. So I think those kind of platforms in the BRICS and others, even like G20 or APEC, all those platforms helpful. Because if the United States want to stand out a little bit, maybe other countries can find a consensus together. Of course, China is a strong, voice in the global south right now. So maybe China can represent some kind of the trend tendencies of the emerging market. They want to, reform as a democratize the international system a little bit. China is a leading force, but I would not say it's a dominant force.
So is China trying to replace the West as in relation to the Arab region and the voice of the so-called Global South?
Definitely not.
Definitely
Short
not.
answer is not.
Okay, great. Mariya, I want to come back to you. Specifically in relation, we know that there's a little bit of a disconnect happening right now between Europe and the United States, and so the kind of unified Western bloc seems to be going through a little phase of disorientation and maybe shifts in priorities. And in your initial remarks, you talked about how your hope is that the European Union will take more of a co-creation approach with the Global South or emerging markets. Now, that's a very bold statement, considering that if we go back to the point of extraction, that Europe has been extracting from these markets for decades and is still doing that. Specifically in Africa, that relationship is still one of extraction. So in light of what is happening of shifting priorities and the emergence of something like BRICS, how do you envision co-creation and a moving away from the relationship that Europe has had with emerging markets for decades now?
Well, first I think that we need to have the entire picture and not to stay only focused on one single element. Let me say first, when you are saying shifting priorities, we need to be aware that the European Union is facing its own internal challenges. There is a growing populism, there is a growing demand from European citizens to protect European interests first. There is also a need to change the pace. There is also the need to face some of the problems linked to the unanimity principle of the decision-making process. At the same time, allow me just to compare very rapidly. For the first time, more than 90% of the European citizens are confident in the European Union, saying that they want to see member states staying united and see them more united in the future. 77% think that their own country benefited from the integration in the European Union, and for the first time, more than 50% trust the European Union in its capacity to overcome the crisis. That means also that for the last 2-3 years, we see a very particular dynamic. Europe is becoming more attractive. Only for the last 3 years, the number of countries that want to become members has doubled. That was not the case for the last decade. But that's not the picture. The picture is that Europe should address not only the strengths, but also the weaknesses. For me, there is 4 main elements. First, clearly continue to identify the strengths of the Union. And we always talk about rule of law and democracy. I want to talk about much more pragmatic examples like Galileo, CERN, Erasmus, Euro, because that's something concrete for citizens and for those that are looking outside. Second, yes, we need definitely to address the weaknesses, and weaknesses linked to our internal problems and weaknesses linked to our external partners. Example is the Global Gateway. It's great to be proud that we have this great initiative, and the potential is huge to be one of the brightest jewels in the European crown, but we need to address the criticism, lack of transparency, extractive, misleading. We have examples from Liboto Corridor to the hydrogen project in South Africa. We need to listen, and we need definitely to dare to say what are the mistakes that we did and how we can now, together with our partners, overcome the difficulties. The third point, that is something also completely new for the European Union, is also for me to dare to take some elements of other approaches. We have China, we have India, we have also Japan. So I think that here some of those approaches can show us how we can learn, and in that way finally to arrive to the 4th stage, develop our own model. So I believe that we changed the pace in this process, and for the last few years we see that Europe is aware that we need to have a new proposition to the world. We need to be chosen. It's not a hazard. That's one of the last initiatives of the European Commission, is choose Europe, and that's how we should continue. Again, for that, I would like to raise 4 elements: diversifying partnerships, and here allow me to make a very personal contribution. I want to see European Union giving much more prominent role to the countries coming from Central and Eastern Europe. European Union and Europe, it's not only Western countries. These countries don't have colonial past. These countries have very nice success stories with Africa, with Asia. I think that we also should address this because they can contribute to co-create agenda because they already have this experience in the past in a completely different way from some old member states. Second point, again, scale up the investments, but addressing the criticism that already exists. Third, I think that when we talk about co-creating agenda, we need to listen to our partners, how to align the projects with their priorities in order to address global challenges. And that's not so often the case, let's be very honest. And finally, I think that also European Union should continue to enhance his strategic autonomy. How you can convince someone that you are a credible, reliable partner if you are not reducing your dependencies on external partners, if you are not investing in key industries. I think that if you would like to change things, we have to lead by example. And I think that maybe the main message is what is counting is Europe's actions, not anymore its words.
Fair. I agree with that. So just a quick follow-up. What is your hope for co-creation between the Union and BRICS in relation to the Global South?
Co-creation.
Your own personal hope for the European Union and BRICS to collaborate to forge a different way.
For me, it's definitely innovation. Innovation ecosystems, here we have something unique as opportunity. We have partners outside of Europe that are amazing, so it's up to us to seize the opportunity. So you think it's going to happen from the entrepreneurs and the new innovators? Yeah, more and more I believe that business and citizens can show to the public government how to do and what to do.
I can get behind that. Tomas, let's come to you, or we'll sticking on the topic of Europe for a little bit. From your point of view and from the point of view of the French Institute of International Relations, in terms of the foreign policy of the EU, do you see any kind of emerging strategies that are leading to what Mariya is talking about around co-creation, really thinking about a different way of doing things? What kind of strategies are you seeing emerge from your research?
Well, first of all, there is no position of the French Institute of International Relations. We speak on our own. That's important to have this caveat. You know, seated in Europe, when you speak about BRICS and Global South, you have to make some distinction. And the big elephant at the time being, of course, is China. And the big elephant within BRICS Plus is China. Within BRICS, correct me, but I think that China represents 65% of the 5 countries in terms of proportion of global GDP. And what has been done by China during the last 5 decades is absolutely unique in terms of development. Now we have to find out a proper relation with China, and that's the most tricky things for Europe right now, given the reconfiguration of the transatlantic framework. So that will be my first answer. You know, there is something specific, given the size, given the importance of China in dealing with Russia. Because the big difference, one of the big differences between China and Russia does want to destroy the EU. It's very clear now, I can elaborate on that, but no time. China needs the EU to export its overcapacities, even if Chinese authorities are reluctant to use this word. So that's one thing. The second thing is also for Europe, its ability to think east of Suez, which is not so easy, you know, because we have the internal market, we have Mediterranean aspiration, we have the links, of course, very deep with Africa, And the idea that Europe should contribute to the evolution of the center of gravity of global economy, which is right now in Asia, is very important and not so easy to be done. And that's India is very, very important. Now, the other problem for Europe, it is the fact that Europe invested, and I spent 20 years of my professional life to do so, so it's a big failure. Try to establish a relationship with Russia, which has been completely destroyed by the aggression against Ukraine. So the other part is Brazil. Brazil is very important because, the Atlantic Basin, it is not only North America and Europe, it is more and more Europe and Latin America, Africa, North America, Africa, Europe, and Africa, Latin America. And that's, I think, the geography we should have in mind when we speak about the relation, that should be invented, reinvented, promoted by Europe right now.
I'm sure John has some comments on that one. I'll come back to you. But Sunjoy, I want to come to you. Let's come to Asia, and let's come to that big country called India, which is kind of a big bulk of the population along with China. But given your expertise kind of across different sectors in India, but also with the rise of ORF as kind of India's leading global affairs think tank, what opportunities do you believe have emerged for BRIC nations to take a more leading role in terms of specifically global innovation and development, and how the world will evolve in terms of technology and innovation?
There are many opportunities. Mariya was speaking about some of them, but I'll say there is one big opportunity, and that big opportunity is President Trump. President Trump is the biggest opportunity. And I'm even prepared to say he's probably God's gift to mankind in a certain way. And thank you, President Trump. He has made countries across the world, including Europe, realize Europe today talks strategic autonomy. Europe today talks multi-alignment. Europe today talks about how they should actually have been investing in their own security. So does this particular region. They are also talking in terms of how to decouple, how to move away, how to securitize themselves locally, regionally, within this larger order. So there is a real concern about threats arising amongst all of them, which is a good sign. And for all these countries, including India, including many parts of Africa and Europe and Asia, national security today has become the primary concern which actually intersects trade, investments, innovation, and how technology will move, what partnerships they will enter into when you come into technology arrangements. So when negotiations now happen and start across nations, and there are a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions taking place between, I would not just say India, Europe, between the Gulf and Europe, between Africa and Europe, between the Gulf and India. See, there are multiple discussions taking place, multiple agreements quietly happening below the radar, where you're building up local, regional models of globalization. The North...
Let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? Local and regional models of globalization.
See, globalization actually is not dead. As far as India is concerned, as far as Africa is concerned, we believe that there is no such thing as independence. You will be interdependent. You will have to be dependent on other countries for various things. It could be energy, it could be food. Every country will have dependencies. Now, those dependencies, if you have to live with those dependencies, you need reliable partners. And those reliable partners will have to be diverse. So that whole idea of diversity, building those diverse supply chains, building an alternate models, whether it is energy, whether it is food, whatever the requirements of the region, whether it is innovation in technology. To be building these multiple partnerships where each can help each other with sufficient insurance. See, that is where national security has become a primary concern which intersects, as I said, across trade, across innovation, across technology. And when we start talking today about investments, a key part of that investment is the idea, especially when it comes to security, co-production. There will not be any partnership without co-production. There has to be technology transfer. So the bargaining is going to get a little harder. It's going to get a little more difficult for the Western nations when these conversations come into many of these discussions. So that is the big shift which is happening. And I think there are a lot of opportunities which exist at the regional level, at the local level, and including even the US. US will be an important part of this negotiation, so will Europe.
Sounds like you agree a little bit with Mariya in terms of we're now entering a world where co-creation becomes more of a driving force. But I love this idea of how you see BRICS as more of a way to diversify partnerships that didn't exist before. Now, Mamadou, I wanna come to you because let's talk a little bit about Africa. And from your perspective, how do you believe blocs like BRICS can really impact shifts in trade alliances, investment routes, but also technological partnerships, specifically in relation to Africa? The only two African, well, three now, African countries that are part of BRICS are Egypt, South Africa, and Ethiopia. So in relation to the rest of the BRIC countries, what are the implications of that on Africa, specifically in terms of trade and investment and shifts, potential shifts away from the kind of dependency relationship with Europe and the United States?
From my vantage point, and this is also continuing from the previous point, I believe that the Africa needs to address, to me, three important and critical blind spots that will enable co-creating, partnering with actually the rest of the global south and globally. The first one, I believe, is actually harmonization of institutional frameworks. Despite even the promise of
Is that possible?
Well, we definitely need to try to address that in doing a couple of things, in really investing in regional policy coherence, but also strengthening cross-border institutional partnership, extremely important in building that policy institutional frameworks. Because without that, actually, the fragmentation will continue and will continue to hamper even the most promising initiatives, such as AFCFTA, and some of the aspects like trade, like mobility, and others. And especially also innovation. Second part, I think that it's important to reclaim our data and knowledge sovereignty. Because too often, development in Africa has been shaped by external statistics and external narratives. And to address that, it is, and research is not sufficiently funded, and thereby we have to rely on that. You often hear researchers that you are say that actually it's difficult even to access data on the continent, or the data is not always something that precise or etc. So I think that it is extremely important to address that issue and build in data ecosystems, strong ones, and elevate also the African research institutions, think tanks and others, so that they can inform our priorities and actually actions and policies. Third, I believe that also it's not really a matter of choosing between east or west or even north or south. It's really about building internal capacities to fund our own development. And this means that we need to unlock domestic capital, and we need to unlock also the power of philanthropy to fuel innovation. What does that mean? It means also that we need to find strategies to elevate certain aspects. If you look at DRM, for instance, the average fiscal pressure in Africa is below, it's around 16, 18%, compared to other countries where it can go up to 40, 50%. This has made the approach for too long dependent on external aid, which oftentimes dictate also what the priorities. Who funds defines where you go. So democratizing taxation, for instance, making it more transparent, more serving the citizen, and all of that will be important. Second, it's about also innovation. And innovation, I believe that with the rise of new philanthropic actors on the continent, there is a huge potential actually for them to fund early solutions that are based on local knowledge and local solutions. But for that, to make it really significant, it is important as well that we address the policy framework around that, put an enabling environment for that African philanthropy to play its role, because ability to fund its own innovation and development, being grounded before you open and collaborate is extremely important, and it's a matter of sovereignty as well.
Just a quick follow-up question, because I think, Africa is such a great example of the continent that's kind of stuck somewhere between the big powers of BRICS like China and India and also the West. And from your opinion, do you see a future where Africa, especially with the rise of a new generation of wealthy Africans who are now being willing to put their money philanthropically into Africa, specifically into the innovation space, do you see progress in terms of truly decolonizing our economies and really seeing deeper agency and deeper collaboration on the continent in terms of trade and the ability for our entrepreneurs to even expand country to country in Africa, because our colonizers left us deeply fragmented and with serious structural barriers?
Yeah, actually, this is where I'm coming from. We are in the conundrum.
Yeah, big conundrum. It's a one way to put it.
Yeah, in the conundrum of a rising young generation, which is more and more globally aware, well-trained, and very hungry of innovation and leading and developing the continent. Between that and old structures that actually have shown their limits in shepherding and providing that leadership. And this is the whole discourse in many parts of the continent today about sovereignty, about really Africa for Africa, and also all of that. But to do that, as I say, it's not something that we decrete and see it happen. There will be extremely difficult reforms and transformation that actually need to happen. For instance, how African countries, you asked if it was possible, but I would say how can we reinforce that institutional collaboration, for instance? If, for instance, as opposed to the European Union, African Union is 70% funded by, foreign...
Outside of Africa.
Yeah, outside of Africa. Yeah. So those are the big shifts that actually need to take place. And as I said, it's not about a Western model or an Eastern model. How can we invest in really indigenous approaches, supporting the movement of entrepreneurs and innovators on the continent? And this, as I said earlier, will require really that we unlock domestic resources. And this requires just strong reforms and changing the paradigm, right? And being brave on what could be the sort of, impacts.
Yep, I agree with the brave part in particular. I know Mariya wants to comment. I see it, but Jojo, I want to come to you, Jojo, because since we're here in Egypt, what would be your advice for how Arab nations in particular should be engaging with China and BRICS more broadly, but how do they engage in a way that doesn't lead to the type of interdependent, I don't want to say interdependent, I think the word is codependent, relationship that Arab nations have historically had with the West? How do we forge a different kind of partnership with China?
Okay, I think the answer is very clear, because we do the questionnaire, I think in some sessions yesterday, the choice about alliance with a superpower to make your own country have its national power was not being voted by anyone. So to build another asymmetrical relationship like they have with the United States, with China, is even not in everyone's mind. I think it's impossible. So what I think people can benefit from China is China's experience, because China is a latecomer in industrialization like everyone else in the developing world. They can learn from China the know-hows and what China's lessons, what China made mistakes. But I think, especially in terms of the Arab countries and Egypt, China and the Arab region share a lot of commonalities, especially in terms of a political structure. Because I want to maybe put a very uncommon argument, I would say the domestic political consolidation is economic asset, because the continuation of the policy and the predictability is a very good thing for business people. Like what happened in China. China have every 5 years of a 5-year plan. So I think right now what the Arab countries are doing is very right, to consolidate the domestic political power, to have a stable domestic political environment. But what need to do next is also...
So you think we also need a very strong Arab bloc in a way?
Because that yes, that's a later one. So I think the first thing is in the time of fragmentation, the domestic consolidation of political power is very important, because you need to unify your own people. But what to do next is to decentralize the economy. You see what happened in China. The different provinces, different big corporations that compete with each other. So right now, I think what is happening very wonderfully is in the UAE, right? They have 7 emirates and they compete with each other. So I think in Egypt now we're also witnessing there are some of our sponsors are already standing up a very strong corporation in Egypt and they compete with each other. So I think furthermore, maybe sometimes Cairo could compete with Alexandria, with Ismailia. That could be happen in the future, because competition creates the innovation. It's not like just the people. If you want to build an innovation system, of course, previously we were living in a globalized world. Right now, you need to focus more on your own national power, which need to create such kind of a state business creation by yourself.
Yep. I want to stay on the topic of technology and innovation, because I know, Mariya, you and I share a passion for innovation, it turns out. And the world is witnessing, specifically in places like Africa and Asia and Latin America, very young populations who are really embracing technology and has an enormous potential to shift power dynamics. But but we need to see power dynamics emerge in a different way than what we had before. And I want to draw to the fact that the first time I heard the word co-creation actually throughout the conference was from you, and it came from a woman, right? So my question to you is, in this world of shifting power dynamics, what role should women in particular be playing, especially the rise of women in tech and innovation? What role should women be playing in these shifting power dynamics to create a much more, I would say, amicable, co-creative, cooperative dynamic across countries in a way that can really benefit emerging markets? Because I know that women have a role to play.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect this question, and I fear not to be very objective.
I did warn you that you might get something off script.
But definitely, not only as a woman, but as someone passionate about innovation, I believe that we need to invest much more in women in innovation. But actually, the numbers, the figures are so alarming everywhere, not only in Europe, but allow me to share with you the example, women in venture capital. 2% of the investment made by venture capital are in women-led startups.
Actually, it went down last year.
It went down
under 2%.
Yes. At the same time, we know that startups where they have diversified teams are showing greater financial results. But again, what is for me quite worrying that we talk about women in innovation only when we have big conferences or big announcements to do. For me, it's a daily work. We have to show this every day. Starting, of course, by telling the success stories more and more in order to inspire young girls and in order to maintain the motivation, but also really to invest. I'm happy that at least now at European Union we have a program that is dedicated only to women in innovation, but it's one single example. We need to scale up. We need a critical mass of initiatives where women can thrive in innovation. So again, here for me, that's a big challenge. And that's not only a European one, it's a global one, because without the half of the population, we are losing our potential to diversify. And especially one of the last analyses in the European Union has shown that all these scale-ups with women in the teams, they are very much impact focused. When we take the SDGs, we see immediately how the SDGs linked to health, to agriculture, or to consumers is directly linked. So for me, what is missing is definitely much more funding, much more links with the business, and much more engagement, of course, from those that are allowing women to thrive in this area. But that's how we arrive again to the co-creation, because we need really to dare to escape from some models, of course, for the European Union finally really to accept that having a regulatory superiority, it's not enough. It's over this period. For innovation, we need flexibility. For innovation, we need new ways of approaching some of the challenges. One possible pathway is the so-called triangular partnership, North, South, South. That means that the two countries from the South, they have trust, they can show solidarity, and one of them could serve as a bridge. So why we don't explore? I have an example in mind, is the International Solar Alliance. I was myself also in this initiative involved, so we need much more initiatives like this one. And if you allow me to add a little bit, what much more also for me is needed is, of course, tailored projects for local needs. That's something that we should have, on one side, recognize as a mistake, but on the other side, really to make some additional efforts to take into consideration the economic, social, environmental context that is responding to those local needs. Otherwise, the perception that West or Europe is showing double standards or is treating one of the partners as junior, it's not something that we should continue. The second thing for me, it's also much more flexible financing options. If we continue to put strict criteria, strict conditions, of course we'll continue to complain that we don't attract private capital. Of course we need to unlock the philanthropic potential. Third thing, for me, definitely digital technology and technology transfer. And here, one important thing is really nourish local talents. If we lose from our mind this idea that what is done in these fields in terms of digital connectivity or technology transfer, it should serve only really the local ecosystem, the talents that are with a local expertise. Final point, if I may, it was mentioned yesterday, regional integration and cooperation. We need to align much more the projects with those cross-border cooperation projects. But here I don't dare to say too much because for me, EU should do his homework first, and that's one idea. Complete the single market. We can't continue to pretend that we are attractive and we try to build partnerships when the companies from your partner countries is coming and is discovering 27 national legislations and all the barriers and the barriers. That's why we often forget that this is something particularly important for EU, and that's why now I very much welcome the idea of the 28th regime. Let's see if it is done properly. That could be a real breakthrough. Final point, education and research. We never talk enough about this, but educational exchanges, it's about mutual understanding. And joint research projects, it's really about the future. There is no innovation without fundamental research.
Yeah.
And one single point
I
that
agree
I
with
want,
you, and I'm sure
moonshot
Mamadou is
programs.
sitting there thinking, I agree with you too. Research and development is core across all of our countries. Now, if only we heard some of your ideas 60 years ago, we may have been
but
in a
my
different
question
place.
is, what is the moonshot program that we have with all the single blocks or regional blocks that we are talking about? Are we able, as simple citizens, to say, well, with this part of the world, we have this project?
Yeah. Well, I want to open it up to the audience for questions, to the panelists, but before I do that, and all of you start thinking about what you want to ask these great panelists, Sunjoy, I want you to bring out just very quickly, just one last question, very briefly. Now, my question is really, how do you think BRIC nations and all of us who are part of BRICS, how can we really forge a new way of connecting with each other as countries? How can we really forge a new way, a new pathway that doesn't emulate the ways of the past, I would say, 60 years since many of our countries gained independence and since the Bretton Woods institutions came into power? What do we really need to do to see a much more collaborative, open world order that really honors local, regional, and global needs?
Dina, BRICS is one of many, but the principles of these many platforms is primarily the same. They are all consensus-driven. Now, most people will think that is a weakness. That is not a weakness. That consensus-driven operations are actually a source of strength. They allow countries in the global south, with the larger countries within the global south, say India and China, to maybe agree, disagree within certain forums on certain issues, build their alliances, build their networks, and give voice to whatever their core concerns are. You see, they will not always agree amongst themselves. There will be differences. We all have different needs. We all have different dependencies. Now, how for each nation to be able to exist, to get empowered, to get to the right place, to the right partner with the right question? Now, that is where these coalitions are really building up, and it is not just within the BRICS. There are multiple organizations. So, this is this, I say we are in a game of predatory economics. When in a game of predatory economics, you don't play chess. You play predator and prey. In India, we call it the Bagh Bakri game. There's one predator, there's several prey. And the only way you can contain the predators is by banding together and limit the predator's room to maneuver, to move, block him. Now, this is the kind of games that are going to be played, and these are the platforms, these are the groupings with which make those possible. We've seen it happen during climate change negotiations. We've seen it happen during trade negotiations, even when the global trade bodies have been deliberately collapsed, undermined, and destroyed by the creators of those bodies, mind you. But the people who created the rules-based order went around demolishing it, mercilessly. These kinds of coalitions are coming into existence, and that is where their strength lies.
Fantastic. Okay, I'd love to open it up to the room for questions. In the back. I'm going to take 3 questions, and then I'll ask you to only ask one question, a question, not a comment, but a question, and please tell us who your question is addressed to. Back here and back here. Okay. هجيلك.
Hello. Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion. My question is...
And tell us who you are.
My name is Asim Al-Ghaish, and my question is in terms of BRICS. So when we're looking at the Global South and BRICS and organizations that are supposed to be catered towards developing countries and the Global South, in my opinion, I believe that it focuses on the history of the Bretton Woods, IMF, World Bank, etc. So how are we supposed to learn about the mistakes from the past, and how are we supposed to learn from the certain mistakes that have made, such as voting power based off financial quotas? So when we're looking at the NDB, you also have voting power based off of financial quotas.
Got it. So you want to know how we can learn from the mistakes of the past,
yes,
and not repeat it as we build new types of
exactly
blocks like BRICS. Got it. Thank you very much. Next question. Who wants to answer that question? Think about who wants to answer that question.
My name is Rami Sobhi. Thanks for all these very fruitful discussions. We have heard throughout the forum about the need for increasing investments, funding. In this context, talking about the Global South, the Global South is a very broad definition. Now, the first question, who will be interested in funding these countries? Is it going to be government-owned programs, financial institutions, private investors? What are the level of credit risk appetite to countries that really don't qualify for any credit?
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question over here. Jojo, you want to answer that question?
سؤال الأستاذ البروفيسور دون صديقي العزيز وبمناسبة إن هو تعلم في
لحظة. You need translation, right? You speak Arabic. The rest of them don't speak Arabic.
Okay.
Okay.
عادل صبري جريدة العرب الجديد. سؤالي لصديقي دون هو متعلم هنا في القاهرة على فكرة، نص مصري بيتكلم باللغة العربية مصري تماما يعني. فهو ذكر بمناسبة ذكره لي أن الصين تريد أن تكون دولة قوية ولكن لا تريد الهيمنة بالقوة كما تفعل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. الصين استطاعت من خلال هذه القوة أن تكون ملاذ آمن لكثير من الأنظمة العربية والدولية التي تبحث عن ملاذات آمنة بعيدة عن الضغوط الغربية المطالبة بالديمقراطية والنظم. هذه متى تكون الصين خلال الفترة القادمة ملاذات آمنة للشعوب الباحثة عن حرية التعبير والديمقراطية لتكون فعلا قائدة على المستوى الدولي. شكرا جزيلا.
I think that question's for you. Okay. All right. Let's do one round actually, I think we only have time to wrap up. Jojo, you have 2 questions. You want to go for it?
Yeah,
Those
maybe.
2 questions, and then who would like to answer the first question? Got it. Okay. Go ahead.
So the second question is about the investment opportunities. I think it's a common problem for developing countries. So I also want to put my head into my Chinese shoes. So in China's experience, of course, China is a country, a socialist country by nature, politically, but it is not because the political system. It is because at the early beginning of China's opening up to reform, China realized there's not a deep capital market like the United States. If you want some innovation and you want to build out your startup, you can easily go to Silicon Valley because they have very mature capital market. But that is not existing elsewhere in the world, maybe except Hong Kong and London. So what China do is that the local government in China, they injected a lot of the capital into the startups and innovation companies, and they become maybe 50% share or 30% share of it. It is not because the government want to control the company. It is because they realize that if they're without the state funding, the company cannot be competing with elsewhere globally. So I think what we can do is to replicate some of this, models, because with the strong government intervention, like in Egypt, like in the Gulf, there are going to be a lot of the companies survive from the lack of the funding and investment. I think for your question, Dr. Adel, so I think the Arab world's chance is regional integration. That's my thinking for a long time. Because what we are witnessing right now, for example, in ASEAN, in ASEAN, they are not even as unified as Arab region, right? Different countries speak different languages. They cannot even communicate with their native language, but Arab world is a unified language regional bloc. So, for example, what is like Malaysia, like Indonesia, and Singapore do? Right now, they're always facing like choosing the United States and China. But what they do? They disguise their own national interests under the umbrella of ASEAN. So always put forward proposal, say this is a regional bloc proposal to you. So at this moment, just 2 weeks ago, I think, 1 week ago, the ASEAN upgrades the free trade agreement with China. But the United States doesn't say any word about it. Why? Because it's a regional collective decision. I think this is something that could be replicated in the Arab region. Of course, Egypt is a strong power, but if the Arab bloc try to unify its voice together, it could become another EU or another ASEAN, which was standing strongly in the world of fragmentation.
Not sure how many people want to see a strong Arab region, but Sunjoy, you want to answer question 1? And also Tomas? Got you.
Briefly on BRICS, what are the lessons which have been learned? Well, one very simple lesson which has been learned is that moving forward, if you're going to have a system of global governance, any kind of global governance, whether it is in MDBs or Security Council or anywhere else, you cannot have gatekeepers. That is the mafia model of governance, where 5 gangland bosses control what is going to happen to the city. That is not meant for peace, that is only meant for war. That cannot operate. So you cannot have these gatekeepers. And when you build your institutions, whether it is the new kinds of MDBs, now, for example, the old MDBs, time and time again, were again used as instruments of coercion. They actually led to instability in so many developing nations. The new form of MDBs have to operate differently. They're trying to operate differently. They are much more open to the idea of how loans can be given, how loans, the conditionalities. Whereas the earlier MDBs used different criteria for different countries. For Greece, it was one set of rules. For Asia economies during the financial crisis, it was a different set of rules. When
Got you, very clear.
2008 economic crisis, for the global north, it was forbearance. Quantitative easing, you kept on relaxing rules instead of going in for structural adjustments. And that is what has really led to the kind of problems which the structural problems which Europe and the US find themselves in today. So that is the way for disaster.
Got it. Got it. I know we have to wrap up because Dr. Abla is giving me the look. So, but before I give it over to her because she wants to do her voting,
And we need to start the next session.
We need to start the next session. I have one last question I want each of you to answer in 30 seconds. And this is because what many of the people in the room don't know about Dr. Abla is she's a big idealist. So I want you to tell us, what are you most hopeful about with these changing dynamics in the world? What brings you the most hope in relation to the Global South and the future of the Global South right now? 30 seconds. Mariya, go.
Shared interest and tangible results.
Got it. Sunjoy.
For me, it is Gen Z and the way they voted during this entire discussion.
Gen Z, I love it. Thomas.
Improvement for education.
It's economic progress that is a grounding for stronger voice.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think it's digitalization is a solution for inequality and reconnecting the world.
Love it. There you go. Over to you, Dr. Abla.
Thank you. Now we'll go for the question and the vote for the audience. 1 second, it will be on the screen. For the Global South to truly prosper, which long-term strategic path is best? A, partner with the West. B, partner with BRICS. C, Global South on its own. D, pragmatic deals with whoever offers them. اللي تغلبوا العبوا in Arabic we call it. "47 seconds. Yes, and the time is up. Very interesting D, pragmatic deals with whoever offer them. So they're very pragmatic, the Gen Zs. اللي تغلبوا العبوا. This is exactly what it means, 46%. Okay, and then very interesting, partnering with BRICS is a good choice by others, but not by the Gen Zs. And 35, Global South on its own. The Gen Zs feel that the South can do something on its own away from the West. Did anybody choose A? Yeah, 12% Gen Z, 17% others. The others still believe more in the West, a lot more than the younger generation. Very interesting result. Thank you very much. Okay? Thank you, Dina, and thank you, panelists. Picture, please.